Hello everyone, and welcome to my The Bold Fans channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The Bold and the Beautiful B&B spoilers for the next 2 weeks, September 8th to 19th, state that Steffi Forrester, Jacqueline McInnes will receive some infuriating news as some fractured family turmoil arises. Luna Nozawa's Lisa Yamada freedom will also be jeopardized, so there will be a lot of action on the CBS soap. Taylor Hayes, Rebecca Budig, will find it difficult to trust her ears between September 8th and 12th. Taylor was going to marry Ridge Forrester, Torsten K., as soon as possible, and then she got dumped. Ridge informed Taylor that he cannot marry her. Thus she will assume this is about Brooke Logan, Catherine Kelly Lang. Once Ridge admits that it is, he may stress that he can no longer ignore what is in his heart. Ridge will always love Taylor, but he will not feel it is fair to stay with her if he cannot offer her his full heart. Taylor will try to persuade Ridge not to cancel their engagement, but will Ridge's decision be final? Brooke's confidence will wane as Ridge reunites with her. Brooke will be frustrated that Ridge has yet to return to her following another fight with Thomas Forrester, Matthew Atkinson. Katie Logan, Heather Tom, will give another pep talk, unaware that Ridge is busy ending things with Taylor. A socialite named Rana and May Kavek will also show up seeking for a Forrester gown, so she'll hear the latest Brooke gossip and hope for a reunion with Ridge as well. After Ridge has broken Taylor's heart, would he go to Brooke and admit they can now be together? Assuming this split lasts, Ridge can have a future with Brooke, albeit he will continue to feel bad about Taylor's anguish. Thomas will certainly rip into Ridge with everything he's got, but Eric Forrester, John McCook, will be overjoyed that his son is doing the right thing. After Will Spencer, Crew Morrow, updates Liam Spencer, Scott Clifton. On the texts he's been receiving, Liam agrees to try to trace them. Whether or not Liam is fully aware of what happened to Will, he will come through for his brother in this situation. Will discover where the texts are coming from, which will lead him to Lee Finnegan's, Naomi Matsuda, apartment in search of the mystery woman. Luna Nozawa will be in the restroom when Will asks everyone to get out. Will Luna do what she's taught and show Will that she survived? Regardless, Lee may get home and discover she has a problem on her hands. Ridge and Brooke may have an opportunity to reconnect on a deeper level over the week of September 15th to 19th. Brooke may eventually get tangled up in bed with Ridge again, relishing the joy of another chance as a couple. Of course, off-screen Steffi will hear about Ridge's treatment of Taylor, and be equally upset with Thomas. Ridge was not meant to let Taylor down again, yet he did just that. There will be further developments in Hope Logan's Annika Noel love life as Carter Walton Lawrence St. Victor continues to push for quick nuptials. Carter will fight hard to keep Hope as his wife, but she will be unable to get Liam out of her mind. Luna's survival secret may not remain hidden for much longer if Will discovers her and recognizes what she did. Luna already hinted at faking some positive pregnancy test results, so she may carry out that plan if everything bursts. According to the Bold and the Beautiful spoilers, Torn Hope will face some challenges over the next 2 weeks, so stay tuned. Ridge Forrester stood on the outside of his huge estate, the Los Angeles metropolis shimmering in the distance against a bruised twilight sky. For decades he had called the city home, with its never-ending throb of desire and ambition. It served as the backdrop for his successes, failures, and the complex web of connections that marked his life. But tonight it felt like a stranger. The weight of his judgments weighed against his chest, as heavy as the dimly audible ocean tides from the cliffs below. He was finished. He was tired of the drama, betrayals, and never-ending cycle of love and sorrow that had cut deep lines in his psyche. Ridge was leaving Los Angeles, and this time he determined he would not injure anyone else. The decision did not come easily. He'd been wrestling with it for weeks, pacing the corridors of the Forrester mansion, his footfall echoing in the silence of rooms formerly full of laughter and disputes. The bold and the beautiful environment he lived in, glamorous, turbulent, and unforgiving, had turned him into a man both respected and despised. He was the patriarch of Forrester Creations, a fashion company founded on innovation and ruthless ambition. He was a lover, a husband, and a father, but he also caused anguish for many people. Brooke, Taylor, Steffi, Thorne. The names whirled through his thoughts, each one associated with a recollection of ecstasy tinged with sadness. Brooke Logan, the woman who had been both his anchor and storm, was at the center of it all. Their love story was legendary. Passionate, stormy, and enduring. But it came at a cost. Marriages are dissolved, families are fractured, and trust is repeatedly damaged. Ridge could still see the pain in her eyes, how they faded when he disappointed her, even accidentally. He had tried to be the man she deserved, but each decision seemed to drive them away. Then there was Taylor, his other great love, whose quiet strength and unfailing loyalty had anchored him in ways Brooke never could. However, he had also damaged her by prioritizing passion over stability and desire above duty. The remorse gnawed at him, a continual reminder of his shortcomings. The Forresters were no strangers to controversy, but Ridge was always in the center of it. His animosity with his brother Thorne, his challenges to connect with his children, his unwillingness to let go of the past. It all added up like stones in a falling wall. He had struggled for control of Forrester Creations for love and against scandal. But now when he looked back, he witnessed the devastation left in his wake. Friends are alienated, relationships are strained, and hearts are crushed. He'd spent years chasing what he thought he wanted, only to discover that it had cost him more than he could stomach. As he stood on the balcony, the night air felt chilly against his skin, and he held an untouched tumbler of whiskey. The city lights flickered below, each representing a tale, a life, or a desire. He had accomplished so much here. Forrester Creations was a monument to his vision, creativity, and ambition. However, it was also a cage, trapping him in a cycle of power struggles and personal failures. He thought of his daughter, Steffi, who had inherited his zeal and stubbornness. She was now in charge of the corporation, and her strong resolve mirrored his own. He was proud of her, but he also realized she bore the brunt of his blunders. He did not want it for her anymore. He didn't want her to live in the shadow of his decisions. He made the choice to depart one calm morning while glancing at an old image of his parents, Eric and Stephanie. They had started Forrester Creations from scratch, pouring their souls into every stitch and design. But they too had become entangled in the same web of drama that now engulfed Ridge. Stephanie's resilience had kept the family together, but even she couldn't avoid the sting of treachery. Ridge recalls her final days, when she looked at him with a mix of affection and disappointment. He did not want to end his life that way, with regrets building up like unpaid bills. He'd spent the past week tidying up loose ends. Meetings with lawyers, discussions with Steffi and Thomas regarding the company's future, and private meetings with Brooke and Taylor. He did not tell them everything yet. He couldn't stand the notion of their tears, pleads, and questions. He merely stated that he needed time, space, and the opportunity to find himself outside of the insanity of LA. Brooke had cried, of course, her hands clutching to his as if she could keep him with her forever. Taylor had been quieter, her gaze searching his face for answers he wasn't prepared to give. He felt they both deserved more than him. They always have. The concept was straightforward. A little cabin in the mountains, away from the glitter and noise of Los Angeles. He discovered it months ago, during a rare moment of isolation while driving along the coast, looking for something he couldn't identify. The cabin was tiny, nestled in a valley where the air smelled of pine and the stars seemed close enough to touch. It was a place where he could be alone with his thoughts, confront the man he had grown into, and decide who he wanted to be. No phones, no emails, and no paparazzi. Just silence and perhaps a chance for redemption. Packing had been a process of letting go. He sifted through decades of memories, including sketches from his early career as a designer, photographs of his children as babies, and letters from Brooke and Taylor that he couldn't bring himself to read again. He only retained what he needed. A few changes of clothes, a sketchpad, and a faded copy of a book his mother had cherished. He left everything else behind, trusting Steffi and Thomas to take care of the rest. The mansion, with its marble flooring and chandeliers, seemed a museum of his history. He no longer belonged there. The hardest thing was bidding goodbye to his children. Steffi had been belligerent, arguing that he didn't have to leave, and that they could sort out whatever was bothering him. Thomas had been silent, his eyes darkened with an understanding that cut Ridge to the heart. They had inherited both his enthusiasm and his pain. He held them hard and promised to keep in touch, but he wasn't sure how or when. He didn't want to make promises he couldn't keep, not now. As he drove away from the estate, the city appeared before him like a map of his life. The Forrester Creations building loomed in the distance, its elegant lines bearing witness to his history. He reflected on the endless hours spent there drawing plans, debating with Eric and celebrating successes. It had been both his kingdom and his prison. He focused his sight on the road ahead, the headlights piercing through the darkness. The mountains awaited, bringing with them the opportunity to start over. The cabin was just as he remembered it, small and unpretentious, surrounded by trees that whispered in the breeze. He unloaded his few possessions, the silence of the room wrapping around him like a blanket. For the first time in years, he felt a shiver of tranquility. There were no expectations, no demands, and no one to disappoint. Only him, the stars, and the weight of his own heart. Days passed into weeks, and Ridge fell into a routine. Mornings were spent drawing landscapes, tree branch curves, and the way light fell across the valley, rather than fashion creations. Afternoons were spent wandering, the crunch of leaves underfoot a reminder of the world beyond Los Angeles's tumult. At night, he sat by the fire with a notebook in his lap, writing letters he might never post. To Brooke, he apologized for causing her anguish. To Taylor, thank you for your love. To his children, he promised to do better, even if he didn't know how. The stillness served as both a soothing balm and a mirror. Alone with his thoughts, Ridge confronted the decisions that defined him. He reflected on the women he had loved, the vows he had broken, and the times when he could have chosen otherwise. He did not avoid the pain of those recollections, but he also did not allow them to overtake him. Instead, he allowed them to guide him like stars in the night sky, pointing to something new. He began to consider his existence in Los Angeles as a chapter, rather than a failure. A chaotic, wonderful, and sad chapter that formed him but did not have to define him. He wasn't fleeing, he assured himself. He was choosing to stand aside, let go, and let people he loved to heal. And perhaps in time he will find a way to return, not as the man he once was but as someone new. Someone capable of loving without hurting, leading without destroying, and living without remorse. Ridge observed as the seasons changed and the world around him transformed. The mountains burst with wildflowers before fading into the gold and scarlet of autumn. He sensed the earth's beat, firm and unyielding, which gave him hope. He wasn't there yet, wherever there was, but he was making progress one step at a time. And that was enough for now. Taylor sat quietly in the corner of the living room, her hands clutched so tightly in her lap that her knuckles turned white. The world outside the window appeared peaceful, trees bending in the late afternoon light, the steady cadence of youngsters riding their bicycles down the sidewalk. But within the home, a storm raged so fiercely that she wondered how long it would take before it dragged her away altogether. She had always imagined heartbreak as a piercing pain that pierced the chest and stole her breath in one rapid motion. But this wasn't sharp at all. It was heavy, as if 1,000 unseen stones were crushing her deeper into the couch and holding her hostage. Ridge's words reverberated in her head, refusing to fade. I can't do this anymore, Taylor. I need to be honest about how I feel and how I don't feel. Taylor had built her life around Ridge, their family, and the promises uttered late at night when everything seemed eternal. She had entirely trusted him. Even when minor doubts arose, missed phone calls, inattentive discussions, his gaze staying a bit too long elsewhere, she chose faith over fear. But now the reality had ripped through the delicate fabric of that trust, scattering threads in all directions. She could still picture him standing at the doorway earlier that morning, his face pallid and his mouth clenched, as if he were holding back poisonous words. He spoke carefully, as if each line were a confession that may fracture the fragile bond between them. And it did shatter. Ridge acknowledged that he had not just fallen out of love, but that he had gotten close to someone else, someone who understood him in ways that Taylor did not. The betrayal went deeper than the words themselves, because it meant that while she was trying to keep everything together, managing the children's schedules, supporting his career, and attending to the countless details that make up a shared life, he was quietly building a different world without her. Even before he left the house, the children realized there was something wrong. Their 10-year-old daughter Chloe had inquired in a shaky voice, "Why is Daddy mad?" Taylor forced a grin, assuring everything was all right, but her throat ached from the lie. Ryan, their adolescent son, had not asked any questions. He had just returned to his room, headphones clamped over his ears, and the door closed with a finality that reminded Taylor of Ridge's departure. It was always more difficult with teenagers because they felt everything so profoundly but said nothing, holding their own storms in silence. Hours passed, yet time seemed distorted and warped, refusing to move forward in any discernible pattern. Taylor moved through the home like a ghost. The family photos on the wall teased her, depicting joyful faces, beach vacations, and birthdays with cake smeared on small cheeks. Each image served as a reminder of what she considered to be strong and unbreakable. Now the grins were contrived, or worse, like artifacts from a life she had never fully lived. When the phone finally rang, her pulse raced as she realized it wasn't Ridge but her sister, Emily. Taylor responded grudgingly, her voice quiet. "Hey." Emily didn't need to say anything because she could read her. "It occurred, right?" she asked softly. Taylor's throat tightened, and she was unable to speak for a brief period. When she did, her voice broke. "Yes." Emily cursed under her breath, then muttered, "I'm coming over." When Emily arrived, Taylor was still sitting on the couch, unable to move or cry. The numbness was worse than the weeping because it made her feel like an outsider in her own body. Emily sat alongside her and wrapped her arm across her shoulders. "You don't have to talk," she said. "Just sit." For a moment the room was silent. Taylor then murmured, "I don't understand. How can you just stop loving someone? How do you leave your family as if it were nothing?" Emily didn't respond straight away since she knew there wasn't one that would soothe. Finally she stated, "It's not you. That's him. People break what they don't deserve." Night fell slowly, accompanied by the noises of a house unraveling. Ryan finally emerged from his room, his eyes crimson, despite the fact that he claimed not to have cried. "Is Dad coming back?" he asked. The question pierced Taylor's heart deeper than Ridge's confession had. She shakes her head. "I don't know." It was true, yet it seemed like a betrayal. Chloe eventually slid into her lap, holding a plush rabbit she'd had since she was 3. "I don't want Daddy to go," she said quietly. Taylor kissed the top of her head and said, "I understand, baby. I don't either." But love couldn't stop someone who had already left in spirit, long before he walked out the door. In the days that followed, everything started to crumble in slow motion. Ridge came over to collect clothes and paperwork, going through the house in an unnerving silence. He attempted to communicate with the children, but Ryan refused to look at him, while Chloe clutched to Taylor's side. Taylor couldn't bear to watch, so she distracted herself with pointless duties like stacking mail, refolding laundry, and wiping down already clean counters. She despised herself for still recognizing Ridge's clothing smelled faintly of cedar, a scent she used to adore but was now tainted by his betrayal. Friends began to hear of the breakup. Some offered compassion, while others maintained an awkward quiet, wondering what to say. Chloe's instructor contacted to express her concern after she fell into tears while doing algebra. Ryan became angrier, snapping at everyone, and his grades slipped. Taylor attempted to keep them together, but every night after the kids went to bed, she sat alone in the quiet house, staring at the walls and wondering how to rebuild after the foundation was gone. Ridge called one evening to see how the children were doing. His voice was calm, perhaps too calm, as if he was speaking from a distance, both physical and emotional. Taylor wanted to shout, questioning how he could seem so composed after tearing them all apart. Instead, she passed the phone to Chloe, who muttered, "I miss you, Daddy." Taylor saw Ridge's face crumple slightly on the screen, and for a split second, she thought he regretted it. But after the call ended, the silence returned stronger than before. Anger ultimately made its way through the numbness. Taylor banged doors, cursed his name, and ripped a portrait in two. It felt nice for a moment to let out the rage that had been bottled up inside of her. But after the rage, the agony returned, worse this time, because anger still bound her to him, gave him space in her heart. She wished for indifference, but it was a mountain she was not prepared to scale. Weeks turned into months. The family adjusted, but the term adjusted felt like a harsh oversimplification. They developed new routines. Ridge picking up the kids on weekends and Taylor filling in the gaps during the week. Holidays became scheduling battlegrounds, with birthdays serving as exercises in forced civility. Ryan plunged himself into basketball, straining his body to the point of exhaustion, while Chloe clung to Taylor with a gentle and devastating affection. Taylor herself attempted to move forward. She returned to work with a renewed zeal, filling her schedule so she wouldn't have to sit in silence. She joined a support group for women going through divorce, and she heard experiences so similar to her own that she wondered if heartbreak had a script that everyone had to follow. Listening to them helped, but it also made her realize that the family she thought was exceptional and invincible was just another casualty in a world full of broken promises.